What's up? I'm AJ and welcome back to Gen Z Garage. Welcome back. As you can see, we've repainted the fuel tank and we're going to be reinstalling it and the pickup back into the car. But first, I would like to tell you what this is from our last video's trivia question.
The device from last week's video is called a shaker siphon. It attaches to the end of a long hose and contains a large glass marble and spring inside. When submerged in a fluid and shaken, the up and down movement causes the shaker siphon to fill with fluid, while preventing it from escaping. After a few shakes, enough fluid creates the pressure needed to start the siphon process. This device can be used for adding fuel to an empty car or for siphoning fuel out of the cars, such as in my previous video if my fuel pump had failed. We had a new winner this time. Mortis Angelica wins the trivia. Congrats on beating Turbo Slug. Thank you everyone for playing. In our last video, we pressure washed the fuel tank, stripping off any oils, dirt, and scale. We then used a wire brush attachment to knock off any additional rust scale, pressure washed it again, and allowed it to sit overnight to completely dry. With a clean tank, we sprayed any areas that we saw rust scale with a rust converter. When this is applied to a surface, the acid in the spray chemically reacts with the rust and converts it to a more stable iron-based compound, further coating it with a black polymer that is suitable for painting. We let that sit and dry for a few hours and then painted the entire tank with a thick coat of charcoal metal etching primer. This primer burns the metal and embeds small zinc particles into the surface, which provide for better adhesion to the next layers of paint. We allowed this to dry overnight and then painted 2 layers of gray epoxy-based paint. We waited 30 minutes between coats and allowed the tank to harden and dry over the next 2 nights. With 3 days of airing out and allowing the epoxy paint to cure, we're ready to begin the process of working on and installing the fuel pickup.
As you can see, I have an array of parts here that I will use to replace and rebuild the pickup before I reinstall it into the car. I got these parts from the Fiero store.
For this installation, I selected a Delphi fuel pump, which is the modern equivalent to what would have been the Fiero to begin with. Delphi was once a GM-owned company, like AC Delco and Delco Remy before it. Their parts are considered high quality. You really don't want to do this job more than once. The pump will likely come with a few parts. I recommend using the best parts from everything you have available to you. The fuel pump is held in place within the pickup by the lower bracket, as well as by the fuel hose that it's attached to. You'll want to size this hose and shorten it if necessary. If you have a quality hose and pump, it may be difficult to install and require a lot of pressure. I've enlisted the help of my dad to help force it on. I also used some PFTE adhesive on the pump and the fuel line to ensure a good seal. Note, if you have a V6, you may be wondering what this device is. This is a fuel pulsator dampener, and it is used to minimize the noise created by the pump. The original fuel pump used in the V6 Fiero had a specific kind of pump gear which necessitated this dampener, not only to reduce noise, but to prevent damage. Modern pumps do not require or need these pulsators. You can use them if you wish, but I'd recommend replacing them. It's also important to understand that the hose included with the pump and pickup is a special fuel hose. It is not your standard vacuum or fuel line. It is specifically designed to withstand being submerged in fuel for the life of the pump and not break down. If you use any other kind of fuel line, you'll be doing this job again in 6 months. To attach the hose, I've opted to use 2 stainless steel hose clamps. Next, we connect the fuel pump connector. If you've purchased the pickup from the Fiero store, the connector will work with all modern replacement fuel pumps. This connector will only go in one way, so press firmly until you hear it click. Next, we install the fuel pump sock. Make sure you inspect the fuel pump to ensure that the orientation is facing in the right direction, otherwise it will impact that baffle within the tank. With the pickup now assembled, we can begin the process of reinstalling it. We've decided to use non-seize PFTA adhesive to help seal the O-ring and prevent fuel leaks. My dad carefully brushes it around the opening where the O-ring is placed. I then carefully place the O-ring into the seat and lightly push it around to get a good seal. We carefully guide the pickup and the fuel pump into the opening until it's fully seated. Next, feed the harness through the retaining ring, then pull the ring around the stainless fuel lines to begin seating it. Just as we remove the ring, we'll work around the ring using a flat blade screwdriver and weighted hammer to slowly lock it in place. With the pickup installed, we use zip ties to properly affix the wiring harness to the stainless lines to prevent them from catching on anything or being pinched during reinstallation. We've also reused one of the rubber line isolators from the original pickup.
I'm going to be putting these fuel and vacuum lines onto the tank now because it's significantly easier to do it now than when it's in the car.
We've opted to use special non-binding hose clamps which use machine bolts instead of a worm screw configuration. This type of clamp provides equal pressure around the circumference of the hose and has a special beveled edges to prevent the hose from chafing or cutting. We'll install the primary, return, and fuel evaporative lines first. We've cut the lines to 12 inches each. This will definitely be too long, but it's much easier to cut and install them onto the hard lines once the tank is installed. Next, we install the fuel fill lines using stainless clamps. These lines will not be under pressure, but they still need to ensure a tight seal so we don't have a fuel leak at the back of the tank. Before we reinstall the tank, I'll clean and inspect the area under the car. It doesn't need to be spotless, but clean the area of any dirt, grime, or dust that's accumulated in the area. Look for signs of corrosion or rust. Many of the components in the frame have been zinc coated to resist rust, but you'll still want to address anything. One of the brackets that holds the fuel tank strap had a corner that protruded out and was catching on the fuel tank when I tried to remove it the first time. I used a small hammer to hammer this flat so it wouldn't be an issue in the future. With the area clean, we'll be reinstalling the straps and T-bolts. We'll start with the strap in the front, and then the strap in the back. We'll also replace the T-bolts. Although the old T-bolts are still in good shape, it's a small expense to replace these with new stainless bolts from the Fiero store, rather than reusing any older rusty bolts. The T-bolts reinstall as easy as they come out. We'll start with one at the front, and then replace the one at the rear. Next, we unscrew and remove the old fuel fill elbow and breather tubes, as it would be difficult to remove these with the tank back into the car. We can now move the fuel tank into place. Be sure to use a mat or a piece of cardboard while you slide it into place. You don't want to damage the new paint job. My dad holds the tank in place while I install the frame support bracket and hand tighten the 4 bolts holding it in and the 2 fuel tank straps. I then finish the job by first tightening the strap at the back, then the frame support bracket, and then the smaller fuel tank strap in the front.
So it turns out, clamp is too small. We have to do an emergency trip to AutoZone to get a bigger one. Oh no, the receipt! Oh no, the receipt! That didn't happen!
With the small hose clamp issue resolved, we finish up some last-minute items as my dad feeds the new fuel pickup harness through the conduit using a coat hanger.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't yet already so you can see my journey in restoring this car. But before you go, here's the trivia question for today. What is this? Tell me in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video.
I'm gonna do a thing that says nap time.
No, Ugh.